Okay, thank you so much everyone for coming to the virtual workshop. So today we're going to be covering lettering and wax seal making. So the first portion, we're going to be talking about lettering and going through that and going through the workbook. And then we'll be doing some of the basics of wax seal. So the whole point of this workshop is just kind of to get you started, get you all the basics you need so that you can actually use your box. And I hope you all use your box because this one's like perfect for the holiday season. So I'm super excited to use it for my gift wrapping and stuff too. So I'm going to flip my camera so you can see my hands. And then as we're going through the class, if you want to put questions in the chat, or you can unmute and ask your question too, if it's more detailed and specific, or if you want to like share, like show me on the camera what you're asking, that's okay too. So let me switch my camera really quick. Okay, let me get this kind of rearranged. Okay, I'm going to come forward a little bit. So the things that you guys are going to need to have out are your workbook. So if you want to have that handy, and then I'm also going to be showing you how to use the glass dip pen. So you don't need to take it out of its little container, but you can just have that close by. And then also your little Ferris wheel ink vial. We're going to be using that too. So in this workbook, this lettering style is called a monoline script. So it's super easy. And if a lot of people that have gotten the box before, we've already done this before. And the reason we're doing this again is because it's close to Christmas, and I feel like we're all going to be doing lots of things that we might not have all the time in the world to learn a brand new thing. So this is going to be really easy if you're a brand new beginner and you've never done lettering, or if you already have a little bit of experience, then it's going to just help you practice and get a little bit better. So on the back of your workbook, there's these blank pages. And what this is called is Canson marker paper. And I love this paper because it is transparent. So if you can see here, I can put it over my workbook and I can do some tracing and I can still see my guidelines. So when you guys are practicing, I would totally use this tracing paper to help you practice, to kind of give you, so you can see the guidelines and you can do some tracing. For this workshop, I'm not going to use the tracing paper just because it'll be easier for you to see if I'm not using it. So I'm just going to write right into the workbook. And when we're doing these practice strokes, if you're on your tracing paper, you can do all of this with the glass dip pen, or you can do it with the pencil. So I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to give you some tips where actually just using the glass dip pen in case you want to do all this practice with this glass dip and the ink, or if you want to just practice in pencil. Personally, I usually always just practice with pencil and then I move to the tool I'm using. But I'm going to show you how to use this first and give you a few tips with this. And then in case anyone wants to use this during the practice, and then we're going to kind of go through these basic strokes. We'll learn the letters and we'll talk about combining them. So if you get your glass dip pen out, I have a little napkin right here with me. So when you pull it out, the first thing that you're going to want to do is just kind of clean off the nib. So I'm just going to like gently kind of rub it so that sometimes there's little pieces, especially in this little styrofoam thing, sometimes those little pieces can be on there. And so that will just get stuck in the little groove. So we just want to clean that off in case there was anything there. And then also in the box, there's this little piece of sandpaper. And that would be in the case that you got like a nick or something on the edge of it, you could sand it, but you shouldn't need this to start with. Like it should be good to go at this point. So that would be only like if you dropped it or nicked it or something. So we have this. And then the other thing you'll need, this is your Ferris wheel press ink. And there were 3 colors, so everyone got a different color, and they are like a green, a reddish, and a gold. And I will say that the reddish and the gold are kind of darker tones, but they were the closest ones they had for Christmas. So, okay, so you're going to take this off, and it's kind of a little bit hard to come off because there's this like rubber seal thing. So if you see that, that's good. That's supposed to be there. and that kind of seals it. And you're just going to want to be careful with this little vial, because if we spill it, then it's going to go everywhere. So for me, I'm kind of thinking I'm going to set mine in my lid. I don't know if that makes it more stable or not. I just don't want to spill it on this desk. So I took this spongy part out of the lid, and I'm just going to set it right there. So then hopefully if it did spill, it doesn't get everywhere. And then for this lid, I'm just going to push that little thing back in there because I want it to be there when I put it back on. So for using the glass dip pen, I think maybe I'll demonstrate a few with the glass dip and then I'll move to pencil, but so you can kind of see how it works. So what we're going to start with lettering, what I always teach first are called the basic strokes. So they look like these kind of funny random little shapes, but they actually combine to make almost all of the lowercase letters. So they're super helpful. Like if you want to learn lettering, you master these and you're going to be good at lettering. Like this is the foundation. So I always start with these. And I will tell you really quick, there's these guidelines here that are kind of reminiscent. Let me focus this camera a little bit. Reminiscent of what you did in elementary school, but the names of these different lines, this bottom one is called the baseline. That's where the base of all the lowercase letters sit. Then you have this waistline. That's where most of the lowercase letters come up to that point. There's the ascender line. That's any letter that has a portion of it that ascends above the waistline. So like an L or a K would go to that point. And then you have your descender line. So that's any letter that descends below the baseline, like a G or a J. And then there's also this angle line to help us get our letters at a slant. So I'm going to be referring to them as those. And then each of the basic strokes has a name too. And so that's all labeled here so you can do it. And we've got one stroke as an example in the workbook, and then room for you to draw your own. So take your tracing paper and you'd put it over the top. And for the ink, I am going to use the tracing paper because with this paper, I'm not sure if it would go through or not. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our little vial and we'll take our glass dip pen and we're just going to dip it straight down. And you want to be careful how far you go in, because as you're doing it, you'll notice the farther you go in, the ink starts to rise and it could spill over the top. So you want to get enough to cover it, but you don't want it to like spill out. And then I usually just do one kind of swipe on the side, and then that's usually pretty good. So with this upstroke, and we're going to hold this like we would a regular pencil. So however you hold a pen, hold it like that. And then I'm using kind of this large area, maybe in between, that's where I'm resting it on my finger, but you're just going to write with it like you would a pencil. And so for this upstroke, you're going to start the baseline and you just do a slight curve up to the waistline. So slight curve. And you'll notice as you're drawing with this pen, it is a very like fine tip, but the ink should flow pretty well. And if it's not flowing out, let's do another dip. Mine's still pretty good. But if yours wasn't, like do a couple more dips to get it going. So one of the things I love about gloss dip pens is you feel so fancy using it, but it's like just as easy as writing with a pencil. Like it doesn't take all this extra skill that some lettering tools take, but it feels so fancy. Okay, so let's do the downstroke. So this one starts at the waistline. You're going to go at a diagonal to the baseline. So you can draw it right over the angle line if that helps. And then I like to draw one like in between and then draw another one. So this one, and I don't need to dip my pen yet. So you don't need to dip it until the ink kind of runs out. And as you're using it, you're going to notice the ink kind of swirls down and you'll notice it. Well, it won't be coming off the tip anymore. That will be one indicator that you need to dip, but you can also visually see as the ink goes down that that's when you're going to want to dip again. So it's so easy. Let me know if you have questions about this glass dip pen. I'm going to move to pencil, but I did want to show you about, so now you've used it and you're done, how do we clean this? So when I'm at home, what I do is I just go to like the sink and I'll just run it underwater. It cleans all the ink off and then I just dry it with a towel, like a cotton, what are those called? Not a terry cloth one, I can't remember, but just like a cotton little kitchen towel is all that I use, nothing fancy. But I'm not like by my kitchen today. So another way to do it would just be to dip it into water to clean it off. And with this one, it's kind of fun because then you get to see the ink swirl, but you do want to be careful not to touch the ink or the tip to like the bottom or the side of the dish you're using. So with this plastic one, I don't think it would be an issue, but if you were using like a glass cup or something, then you could potentially like nick the end of your pen. So I'm just kind of swirling it around a little bit. And then from here, I'll just use my napkin and I'll just go over it. And sometimes, like this one, I'm trying to see if it's still there. I think I got most of it, but what you could do, like, I think you could just very gently, like with a cloth, if you needed to, like get into the grooves a little better, especially if you let it dry. I like to clean it right when it's wet, like while the ink is still wet, I clean it right away. So that the ink doesn't get dried up in those little grooves. Because if you get chunks of ink in there, it's not going to flow as well for the next time. So those are just a few tips on the glass dip pen. And do you guys have questions about that? Do you use the dip pen regularly with your lettering or just for special look or purpose? Could you tell us pros and cons? So I use it most when I want to do a monoline or faux calligraphy. So I guess let me show you that real quick. So it depends on what material I'm using too. So glass dip is going to work well on like a thicker, like a handmade paper. This could write on it really well, just like a nib with the pointed pen. So for example, and the other thing, I would use it for monoline, which is what we're learning today. So if I want this look, or I could do faux calligraphy. So I could add those lines and fill it in. But if I'm wanting the look of a brush pen that would be thicker lines or a pointed pen, then I wouldn't use it. So yeah, I guess I feel like I use it about the same amount as I use my pointed pen. I think I use like just regular drawing markers the most, and then probably brush pens, and then these and the pointed pens for calligraphy. So I do like these a lot, but I think some people, depending on what writing tools you have, you might use these ones a lot. And I had another thought, but I just lost it. I forgot. Do you guys have any other questions about these glass dip pens? So after you clean it, you do want to just continue to store it in that little box. Unless you have like a space. I don't really have a space in my house that's dedicated to my art supplies that children aren't around. So if you have a space that's like, there's no children or little animals or anything that could get by it, you could just put it in like with your other like writing stuff. But just to make sure that it doesn't break, it's nice to have it in that little box. The other thing that I was going to mention is this ink. So this is Ferris wheel press ink. And so it's a really high quality ink that's good for the glass dip pens, and it's used a lot with pointed pen calligraphy, and it's used for like fountain pens. But they sell these in little packs of 3, these little tiny jars, and they have a bunch of different color combos, so you can get that. And they also sell the jars like in bigger jars like this that are full of ink too in different colors. So they're a great company. They're based in Canada, but they ship worldwide, and they're a great company for these different types of inks that work well. Another thing that a subscriber had told me was that she's used these with watercolor before, and that worked really well. So with our last fall box, we did get watercolor, so you could do that. And what you would do is you would just paint on the watercolor paint, and then you could write with it. And so that's definitely an option. The other thing that's fun about this one, or another pro, is it's easy to switch colors. So you would just clean it and you could use one color and then switch back to the next color. So that's the benefit too, is that you can easily switch colors too. So I'm going to continue demonstrating the strokes with the pencil. And I'll go back to using this when we get out the tags and talk about actually lettering on those. But I'm just gonna demonstrate in pencil because I think it'll be a little bit darker and easier for you guys to see. But if you have questions, please put them in the comments and I'm happy to answer them. So we've got our 2 basic strokes so far. We've got a few more to go. So the next one is called the overturn. And this one, it starts at the baseline and you're going to do a slight curve up to the waistline and then curve back down. So baseline, up to waistline, and back down. So it's kind of this upside down U shape. And so there's the one example to trace with, and then you can do a few on your own. And tracing is a great way to build muscle memory in your hand as you're learning lettering. So the next, except I was not going to use, sorry, I wasn't going to use the tracing paper so you guys can see it better. The next one's the underturn. This is like a U shape. So you're going to start at the waistline, curve down to the baseline, and then curve back up. So it's this U shape, and you can use those angle lines to draw over to kind of get the right angle, if that helps. That's the underturn. The next one's called a commandant. This one starts at the waistline and you're going to come about halfway down and then go back up again. So it's like a little mini underturn. So start at the waistline, come halfway down, come back up. And this is a little connector stroke. From here, you'll turn your paper over to the back. And then we've got a few more on this side. The workbook is front and back. So for this one, it's called a compound curve. This one, you're going to start at the baseline, curve up to the waistline, curve back down, and curve up again. So trace that first one, get a feel for it, and then draw a few on your own. For this one, we want to have equal amounts of negative space. So this example is what we don't want, because see, there's tons of space on this side and not very much space on this side. We want it to be equal amounts of negative space on both sides of this curve. This next one is called an O form. This one's going to start, you're going to start drawing it at the 2 o'clock position right there. So you'll start at 2 o'clock, you'll work your way around and then connect it. So it's an oval shape and it's at an angle. So really when you're drawing it, it's like the angle line should be the center axis of it. And sometimes when you're drawing, it can be kind of tricky like that one to connect the endings. Like sometimes it's hard to get those to connect. So when I'm drawing it, as soon as I get down to this area, my eye stays on the end point. So my eye is here as I'm drawing, and that just helps me to connect that shape a little bit more easily. So these last two are the loops. So this is the ascending loop. So you start at the waistline, you're going to curve up to the ascender line and then come back down. And I like to draw those right over the angle line because then you can get a nice straight side. I think a lot of people, myself included, I have a tendency to kind of curve, like make a curve here, and we don't want that. We want it to be nice and straight. So drawing it on the angle line can help you get that. And this last one is called the descending loop. So this one starts at the waistline and you're going to come down to the descender line and back up to the baseline. And so this one also, again, is helpful to draw on the angle line because then you can get that angle just how you want it. So those are the basic strokes. Do you guys have any questions on these ones? These are the drawn versions of those. Okay, let me know if you do. If you look at the bottom of page 2, you can see some examples of how these are combined. So if you take the O form and an underturn and you just squish them together, then you're going to get the letter A. If you take an O form, a descending loop, and an upstroke, and you squish those together, you're going to get the letter G. So almost all of the lowercase letters are made up of these different strokes, just combined in different ways, which is super cool because you can just practice these and get really good at these, and then that means your letters are going to look amazing. So next, I want to go through and just walk you through how to draw each of these letters really quick. There's one other stroke I wanted to show you that's not in the basic strokes that I just remembered. So this is an O form, but there's something called a reverse O form. So again, for the O form, if I draw it here, we started at 2 o'clock and we work our way around. Well, for the reverse O form, we start on this side. Instead of going this direction, we're going to go this direction. So we're starting here and we're working our way around like that. And it comes more to a point than an oval exactly. And that's just moving this way. And this is on the letter B, P, and K. So that's just, it's not one of the basic strokes, but we use it in 3 of the letters. So I like to show you that just so you're not taken by surprise when we do get to those letters. There are some where it's reversed. And the same with these like descending loops. There's a few examples where instead of the loop facing this way, the loop's facing the other way, like on the letter Q. So it's all based on these strokes, but sometimes we change them a little bit to work with the letters. So from here in your workbook, you can take this and set it to the side. And then we're going to go on to the next page and we're going to start with letter A. And Mary asked a great question. Do you lift between each stroke or is it continuous like cursive? Thank you so much for asking that question. So you want to lift between strokes. So for example, in this example, we have an O form. We're going to lift, descending loop, lift, upstroke. So it isn't like cursive where your pencil's continuously down and you just keep going. With this one, you are lifting between strokes. There are some exceptions where you don't, and I'll teach you those. But generally, you do want to lift. And it's nice because it kind of gives your hand a break, but it also lets you, especially if you're working on a whole composition, kind of see what your next stroke is and how you want to draw it. So great question. Okay, so let's jump into these. We're on page 3. So if you're doing it at home, you can of course use the tracing paper to draw over it, and you can do some tracing and then draw your own. I'm just going to draw into the workbook so you guys can see it a little better. So the other thing I'll mention really quick is these basic strokes are up here. So if you're not sure what the basic strokes are in the letter, they're all kind of listed above it. So for this one, for the letter A, we're going to do an O form. So we start at the 2 o'clock position and work our way around and then lift up, and then we're going to do an underturn. So we're just squishing them together to get the letter A. So again, it's an O form and an underturn. O form, underturn. For the letter B, I've taken some stylistic liberties to change this up a little bit to be a little bit cuter. So this is what the B would look like if we use the strokes that we just practiced. So it has an ascending loop in it. It has the O form, but it's a reverse O form like we talked about, where we're starting here and working this way, and then an upstroke. So if we take off this little part, there's our ascending loop. And this upstroke's just a little bit stylized. So let's walk through this. In this little ascending loop with an entry stroke, I use on the D and the H and lots of letters. So by the end, we're going to be really familiar with this. But you're going to start in between these 2 lines. And then you're going to do a little entry stroke that goes into an ascending loop and then come down. And the ascending loop is a little bit more loopy. And that's the thing that's fun about these basic strokes is once you learn them, you can kind of manipulate them and change them to get kind of different looks. Then from here, we're going to start down in this corner and we're going to do that reverse O form. Then we'll lift up our pen and then we'll do a stylized upstroke. So for this one, it's definitely going to be a good idea to trace a few of them, kind of get a feel for it, and then try drawing some on your own. And again, this little entry stroke and ascending loop, we're going to use this a few times. with a different letter, so we'll get more familiar as we go. So the next one is the letter C. So this one is based on the O form. We'll start at the 2 o'clock position. We'll work our way around. Instead of connecting it, we'll kick the bottom out into the right. So this one's probably it's very similar to probably how you already write a C, or very similar to a cursive C. And we just want to make sure we're ending this C pretty high up and close to the waistline. We want to get it up there so it's ready to connect to the next letter. The next one is D. This one is going to start again halfway between the ascender line and the waistline. And we're going to do this little entry stroke and ascending loop. For this one, we're going to go right into the underturn. So that's all one motion, and then we add our O form. So again, entry stroke to ascending loop to underturn, and then the O form. So when you're practicing tracing it, trace it, all of that in one motion, and then add the O form on it. So that's the letter D. Next is E. This one is going to have, it's based on the O form, but we're going to start halfway between the waistline and the baseline, and we're going to do a small loop, and then it goes into the O form. So really this whole area is like the O form, but we've got a small loop first. And this one's probably kind of how you already write the letter E. It's not that different. We just want to make sure to end it up here by the waistline so it can have a good connection. Okay, from here, we're going to flip our page over and go to the back. And we're on to the letter F. So F is the tallest letter. This one, we're just stylizing this upstroke. So instead of going this way, we're just turning it the other direction. But it would not be wrong. Neither way is wrong. It's just a fun way to stylize it. So we'll do a little upstroke with an ascending loop and descending loop, and then another upstroke. So from here, I'm doing all of that, lifting, and then the upstroke. And as you get more familiar with lettering, there may be times when you're like, I'm not going to lift up my pen for that. I don't need to. So this one, you could do the upstroke and this all one motion, and then the other upstroke. This whole thing is all one motion because if we were using a brush pen or a pointed pen, that whole side would be thick, and it would be really hard to be using pressure and then have to lift up and then match, put it back down and match the pressure. So that's why we just do it all one motion. For the letter G, this one is going to be an O form. So we'll draw that first. Then we have our descending loop, and then we have an upstroke. So trace a few, O form, descending loop, and upstroke. And these strokes, they're applicable to like any type of lettering you do. So if you continue to get the box and we get other tools in it, or if you kind of go on your own journey and do lettering more, if you use a brush pen or a pointed pen or any of those, these are the same basic strokes that you would use for any of that. So it's just going to give you a really great foundation for starting in lettering. So for the letter H, we again have this little entry stroke and ascending loop. So halfway between these two. So that's the same that was on that B and the D. And then this is our first compound curve. So it looks like that. So ascending loop and compound curve. And something that's important here, a lot of people, once they do this, our compound curve starts at the bottom and goes like this, right? A lot of people just want to start drawing here and just skip that step. But you'll notice the difference. There's this tiny little pocket of negative space right here that we don't have on this one. So we just want to make sure we start it right here and work around. So all the strokes, we just want to make sure we do them completely. Next is the letter I. This one is just going to be an underturn, and then we'll dot it. So underturn and a dot. And you can draw on the angle if that helps. Trace a few. That one's a pretty easy one because it's just the basic stroke with the dot on it. Next is the J. This one is going to be a descending loop with an upstroke, and then we dot the J. So descending loop, lift up your pen, upstroke, dot the J. The next one's K. This one's going to have that same little entry stroke and ascending loop. And then it has a little mini O reversed O form. So it's going to start on this side and work that way. So it's just this little loop right there. And then we go into an underturn, but really it's more kind of diagonal here. So this is a good one where it's based on the basic strokes, but we're kind of stretching it to fit. So this is a good one to kind of trace and get familiar with, and then try drawing some on your own. Tracing is so helpful with lettering because it just helps build the muscle memory in your hand, where eventually you don't really even have to think about it. Your hand just knows how to draw these shapes really well. So from here, because this workbook is front and back, I like to have a done pile for my workbook. So I'm going to put that in my done pile and set that aside. And then I'm going to get my next page. So we're on L. This is on page 5. And if you guys want to be using the tracing paper or your glass dip pen, that's totally fine. I'm just using the pencil to demonstrate. So for this one, for the letter L, this one's going to start at the waistline and you're going to curve up to the center line and come back down into an underturn. So this one is all one motion. We're not lifting up our pen at all in this. And we just want to make sure that we're ending up here at the waistline. It kind of looks like a big E. For this one, for the letter M, this one is going to have a downstroke, an overturn, and then a compound curve. So downstroke, overturn, compound curve. And N is very similar. This one is going to be downstroke and a compound curve. And again, we just want to have equal amounts of space on these two sides. And we just want to end it up here. And when we're drawing our compound curve, we want to start it at the bottom like we practiced. Next is the O. This one is going to start, it's an O form and a comma dot together. So we're going to start at the 2 o'clock position and do our O form. And then the comma dot, we start over here about 10 to 11 o'clock, and then do that little connector. So the comma dot, what it is just helps connect letters to the following letter. It's like a connector stroke. So that's the O form. Next is P. This one is going to have a long downstroke and a reverse O form. So we're starting here and we're working this way on this one. And then it has a stylized upstroke. So this one's very similar to the letter B. At least the reverse O form and the upstroke part are the exact same. So there's P. Next we have Q. This one is going to be an O form. And it has a descending loop, but it's reversed. So it's going to be, the loop points this direction, and then an upstroke. So O form, reflected descending loop, upstroke. O form, reflected descending loop, upstroke. And then from here, we're going to turn our page over to the back. You guys are doing so awesome. We're almost done. We've just got, how many more? 5, 6, 7, 8 more. So in the alphabet, there are 3 letters that are called outlier letters. And these letters have portions of them that are not made up of the basic strokes. So for example, this one is the letter R. This one is considered an outlier letter. So when we draw this, first we're going to have an upstroke, which we already know that. And this is the part that's unique. It's a little loop and then comes down and then goes into an underturn. So you're gonna go upstroke, a small loop, and come down into an underturn. And this one, you can do all one motion if you prefer. That's gonna give this a more rounded look right there, or this will be more abrupt. Upstroke, and it's going above the waistline on this one, ascending loop, or a little loop, and then an underturn. So that's R. So that one's probably going to take a little bit more time to practice and get familiar with. The next one is S. This is also an outlier letter. So this one, you're going to do an upstroke, and again, you're going to go above the waistline for this one. And then you come down and then come back around. So a cursive S is just like this. So that's basically what we're doing. We're just making it looped instead of just doing an upstroke at the end. So kind of just think of drawing a cursive S, and it's going to be kind of the same concept. We're just looping it around and coming up. So that one, again, both of these two are going to be good to practice so you can get more familiar with them. The next one is the letter T. So this one is going to be a downstroke and an underturn combined. And then you use what's called a crossbar to cross the T. Crossbars are on lowercase t's, capital A's, and capital H's. And T's are a really good letter to use flourishing, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, the next one is U. This one is going to be 2 underturns. So we're going to do an underturn like this, and then one more underturn. So this one kind of looks like a W, but it's a U. So that one's pretty easy. We're just putting those 2 strokes together. For V, if we were to take a compound curve and cut off this portion, so that portion's not there, that's what we've got going on for the V. So we're going to start here and then go into the compound curve and then a comma dot. And I did make this comma dot a little bit too big. So we want just to go about halfway down. So that's V. So we've got W. And W is going to be an underturn, and a comma dot. So this one's like the U. The thing that makes it a W is a little comma dot that becomes the connector to connect the W to the next letter. And I'm going to set this one aside. I'm going to go, we've got 3 more letters and then we're through the alphabet. The next one is X. So this one has, if we take our compound curve and we cut off this side and cut off this side, that's what we're working with here. So we've got this, and then we're going to cross it like that. And you could cross it just straight, or you could, whoops, paper moved, get like really exaggerated with how you cross that. But it's essentially just half of the compound curve and then a little cross. We've got 2 more. So this is the letter Y. So this one is going to be an underturn, a descending loop, and an upstroke. So underturn, descending loop, upstroke. And the last one is Z, and we're really squishing this one into the basic stroke. So it starts with an overturn that's a little more round, and then a descending loop that's a little more loopy, and then an upstroke. So this is going to be one that's probably going to be good to kind of trace a little bit. A good alternate to this would just be something like this. So you're just going to do a Z, but you're just going to make the top and the bottom kind of curvy. And then that could be an alternate versus this if you're not loving the look of that. So let me know, you guys, if there's any letters that you wanted to see again, that you want me to demonstrate again. And I will totally do that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about combining these. So basically what we're going to do is we're just going to squish these together to make words. But I did want to show you one thing. So let me know if there's other letters you want to see. You can drop it in the chat. So my name's Betsy. So if I were to do my name with this little style that we just learned, it would look something like this. So there's my name, and that looks great. I love it. The thing that's cool about once you know the basic strokes is you can start to change them. So for my name again, I could say, okay, I want to do a really big ascending loop and a really tiny O form, just the same kind of E, a big downstroke and underturn, and my S, a little underturn, really big descending loop, and cross it. So then we get two totally different looks, even though we're still using the same basic strokes. The same strokes are still there. We're just making some bigger and some smaller or exaggerating them in some way. And so I think a lot of times when I first started lettering, I was seeing this and I could not figure out how people were doing this. And it made no sense to me until I learned the basic strokes. So I would start here, learn these strokes, learn the letters, and once you're feeling good about it, then you can start playing and being like, what if I make this big? What if I make that small? And you can kind of create your own style and your own look for different things. So I always like to show everyone that because this really is based on the basic strokes if you break it down. So did anyone come up with any letters that they wanted to see again? Okay, let me know if you do think of them. So in the rest of your workbook, I'm going to show you a few more things that are in here that we're not going to cover tonight, but there is all the uppercase letters examples here and numbers so that you can look at that and use that if needed. So I'm going to put that there. There's this section that talks about flourishing, and I'm just going to demonstrate that really quick on my paper, but this is kind of walks you through it. It gives you a few just flourishing little things that you could trace and practice or incorporate. There's also block letters. I love doing block with script. I think it's so pretty and fun. And then there's also these different little illustrated examples of different like holiday type things that you could add in. And then the back page is a guide sheet. So a lot of our tags already have stuff printed and ready to go. So you just have to letter the name. But there are some that are blank. So you could, if you were wanting to do a little bit of drawing and doodling, that there's just some ideas in here for you for that. So I just want to give you a couple more tips with connecting letters and working on that. And then we're going to do a couple examples of working like on the actual tags and just give you a few tips on that. So I love to use this guide sheet when I'm practicing. So I'll do this a lot, or I'll just have my guide sheet out and I'll put this tracing paper over it to practice. So there's two things you want to look out for when you're connecting letters. So if I were to write the word hi, okay. So something that's happening here is when I finish a letter, like the letter H, I finished it up here at the waistline. So I finished it up here and I drew my next letter. And this one, I finished it up here and then I drew my next letter. And what that does, it creates these little pockets of negative space that make this easier to read and visually prettier. So another example, if I don't do that, if I write the same word, but I decide I'm just going to end it right there, like I don't need to finish it, you can see how you're getting a different look. Like it doesn't look finished because there's no little pockets there. So that's something you want to look out for whenever you're drawing a letter. You just want to make sure you finish it at the waistline so it's ready to connect to the next letter. And that's what creates those pockets of negative space that make it easier to read. And then the other thing that you want to look out for is the spacing between letters. So this space between this letter and this letter A and the A to the T, that spacing is called kerning. And we just want it to be consistent. So this is kind of like an even amount of spacing. If we wanted to do really wide spacing, we could. And then see this space is much wider, or we could do it where it's much tighter together. So you can see that. And so the tip with this is you just want to be consistent. That generally speaking, with your word or phrase or composition, you're going to want to have consistent spacing instead of this one's kind of middle ground, and then you do a super wide, then go back to middle ground, then super tight. Sometimes that doesn't look that great. So you just want to kind of be consistent with your spacing that you're doing. And you'll also notice that the spacing, if you're going to do wide spacing, your letters are going to be a little bit wider, like from here versus this A is a really skinny A, and this one's a little bit wider. And so if you're going to have a less amount of spacing, your letters are also going to be really tight too. So those are just a couple tips with actually connecting the letters together. And so I just wanted to do one more little example, and I'm probably going to get out a little tag. So I'm going to have this out, and then in your box, you've got 30 of these little gift tags, and I did some of them that are just ready to go. Like this one, you could just, you could stick that on and it's good to go. You don't have to add anything. You could do the person's name on the back if you wanted to with your glass dip pen. But I just wanted to give you a few options because sometimes you're just like, you're rushed and it's busy. And so I just wanted to give you some that you don't have to do everything. And then there's some where you have room to write and draw, some where there's just room for a wax seal. So there's lots of fun, different little options here in these little card sets. So I'm going to pull out one of these blank ones. So this one right here. So there's lots of room, and this would be a fun one to add our name to. And for this example, I'm going to say that there's not a wax seal on this one. I'm going to be able to use this whole space to put the person's name, but it would be cute to add a wax seal. I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. So if anyone has a name that you want to see lettered, let me know and I'll do it on this one. But we had a question, what type of paper did you use for the card set? So for these cards, this is, my printer made these, so I didn't make them myself, but it's 100-pound paper. So it's a pretty nice thick paper. And I do like it for that reasons, because it's like, it feels substantial, Caroline. Yes, let's do it. I forgot that I asked you to tell me your name, and I was like, why did she put Caroline, please? But yes, because you're answering my question. Hello, Betsy. Okay, so let's do it. So Caroline. So I'm going to give you a few tips for like flourishing here, and then we're going to draw on our tag. So if we do Caroline, if you go to this page, it shows the C like this. So it's just a larger version of the lowercase c. So we could do that. And something that I usually do is with the capital letter of a name, I don't always connect it to the next letter. So in this case, I wouldn't connect it. I'm just going to squish them close. So let's draw one out, and then we'll see if there's things we could add to it. Yes, there's an I, N, E. So places that are good for flourishing and adding are going to be beginning of a name or word, the ending, and any ascender letters or descender. So we don't have any descenders here, so we don't really have that as an option. But something you want to consider is if you add flourishing to something on this side, you're going to want to add it over here. If you add flourishing to the top, you're going to want to add it to the bottom. And since we don't have like a Y or something coming down here that would be easy to add flourishing to, then I don't think we'll add some flourishing to the top or bottom. But what we could do is with our C, we could fancy this up a little bit. So we could do something where we go like this, just add that extra loop. We could do something where we add something like that. So this is looking nice on this side, but you'll notice it looks a little bit unbalanced now because we've got lots of fancy going on over here and we don't have anything going on over here. But it ends with an E, and E is kind of one that a lot of beginners, myself included, I used to do this. I would add like another, like, oh, I'll do a little loop or something. But then you run into this problem of like Caroline E, like, is that another E or is that a flourish? Like, it looks too much like a letter. So I don't usually do a little loop on the E. The thing that I would do with this one is I would just make this E a little bit like bigger and bring it up. So that's how I would end that one. Let's do, Beatrice wanted to do hers, so let's do hers really quick. So we would do the B. And B is also, so my name's Betsy, so I often connect the B because it just goes easily into this E. Let me know if there's any other names you guys want me to see while we're doing this. Okay, so this one is a good example because we have this big, a descending loop here on our Z. So something that I like to do, you'll notice I didn't cross my T, I didn't finish off the Z. So I'll do this a lot, especially if I'm gonna have another name. So if you say you're saying Beatrice and Dan or something, like another person's name, if it was a couple, you're gonna have to think about, oh, well, if I'm putting this person's name under here, I have to consider, like, I don't want this to run into this one, if that makes sense. So that's why I like to leave off kind of the descending loops or crossing the T until the end. So we have with Beatrice, so if I wanted to add something onto this B, I could add a little entry stroke here. And if I add it here, I need to add it to this side. So I need to add, I could do something like that. And that's kind of big. So now I'm like, maybe I need to make that a little bigger to balance it. And then for this T, I'm thinking I'm just gonna cross it like that. I could make it kind of curving if I wanted. And there's nothing down here to add, but if I do feel like this is in balance, I could just do something like that underneath to balance out that T. So that's a fun one. And then we have Irma. So for this one, the letter I is like this, and then we have our R. So this is kind of like the basic, but something that I'll do sometimes, if there's not a letter that's a descending loop like this Z or the T that I could easily do, sometimes I'll break this off and do something. So for Irma, I could do the R, and then I'll go into the M, and then I'll bring it down and do a little loop, and then do the A. So sometimes I'll do things like that on an M. We could have done it on the R or the N, but I'll kind of just do this little loopy thing to add a little extra something so it feels like it has a little bit of flourishing in there. So those are a few examples of just different names, and I'm assuming that's what most people are going to put on their tags, is just the name that you're going to write. So when I'm actually okay, I'm ready to put this on my tag. So what I would do is, if you're feeling confident, I would just do it directly with the glass dip pen. So you could take your glass dip pen out, you're going to dip it in the ink, and you're just going to go for it. If you're not feeling that confident and you want to trace out in pencil first, you can. The thing is that you'll just want to do it really lightly, because so I'm just going to write. So if I'm writing like regular pressure on this tag, and then I go to erase it, I'm going to get most of it off, but I might not get all of it. So you can still kind of see it faintly. So if you do use pencil, you're going to want to do it really lightly so that you don't, so you don't leave marks on it. And I'm realizing there's pencil marks on this table. from writing on my workbook upside down, so it got a little bit on here. Okay, so let's go. We're gonna try Caroline. So this is our example. And so sometimes I'll do this too, where I'll just write it out to the side and be like, okay, that's how I want to do it. That makes it easier to draw it here. And so when you're doing this, if you want to do it in pencil, you'd want to do it really lightly. And you're just going to try to center from top to bottom. So I do my C, and then I do my A. And I'm just going to, again, I'm following the basic strokes that we learned. I'm just going letter by letter, and I know my E needs to be big because I already decided that. So there's something like this. And it's a little bit closer to this side, but not enough to bother me or to redo it. So from here, this is when I would get out my glass tip pen and my ink again. So if you joined since the beginning, you're just going to take your ink like this, and you're just going to dip your glass dip pen into it. And you don't want to dip it all the way because the ink you'll see it will start to rise up. So you just don't want it to overflow. I'm going to set that to the side, and then I can just go over my pencil. Let's see, I'll start here. And I don't have to be exact about going over the pencil line. I can just be close. And I think I'm going to have enough ink that I can just go all the way. I feel like I need a little bit more. So I'll just re-dip and then kind of gently press it against the side so any excess ink comes off. Ah. And you'll notice I didn't finish that. I felt like I got stuck, so I just lifted up, and then it still feels stuck, so I'm gonna go at it from this angle. So then from here, I have to let it dry. So make sure that you're gonna wanna let it dry all the way before you erase. And you'll notice I had, my thing got stuck, my pen got stuck on the paper, like it dug into it. So it kind of has that little spot there that I don't love, but that's okay. And the other thing that can happen sometimes is you'll get where these connections aren't exact, but I think it's going to be fine. I feel like it's part of like making something that's hand lettered or done by hand. There's going to be these little imperfections that are still really pretty. So again, we want to clean this right away. We don't want to let that ink dry, because then it will get stuck in all the little crevices. So I'm just kind of waving this around in my little Tupperware. If you're at home and you're close to a sink, I usually just run it under the water, and that works great. So I've got it all clean, and then I'm just going to dry it off. And there we go. So, and then I'm going to set it back in my little box so I don't ruin it. So let me know what questions you have about lettering at this point. I'm going to close my ink so I don't spill it everywhere. At this point, I'm going to get out, plug in my wax seal guns, and kind of walk you through those. But on the lettering side, let me know what questions you have. Carolyn asked, did you rinse ink with cold, warm, or hot water? I'm using cold water because I poured it from my water bottle, the water. So, and at home, I don't think I've ever changed it to be warm. So I think I always use cold and it comes out fine. I don't know if it would come off faster if you use hot water, but yeah, I don't think the temperature matters too much. I think it works any way you do it. So for this next part, I'm going to show you the wax seals. So I have here my low temp glue guns. I have to plug them in to get them heated up. And let's talk about wax seals. If you have lettering questions, drop them in the comments and I'll go back to them. Okay, so I'm going to set I'm just gonna clean up my area a little bit so I have some room to do seals. I'm gonna let that dry a little more. Okay. So for wax seals, you're gonna need first, you're gonna wanna get your sealing wax out. So we have these 3 different colors that were really fun for this box. The dusty green, white, and the red, so perfect for Christmas. And I have both of these plugged into, just plugged in, and this one is a low temp glue gun. This is from my shop. It's already set to low temp, so there's not a switch. But a lot of glue guns, and one you might already have at home, just has this dual temperature switch. So you're just gonna wanna switch it on to low, and then that's gonna be good for doing the sealing wax. Even on low, the sealing wax can get too hot. So I'll give you some tips about that, but you just want to always make sure it's on low, because if it's on high, it's going to boil the wax and you're going to get a ton of bubbles in the wax and it's not very pretty. So, let me set that out. I've got my stamp from the box, and, they come with the handles. When I'm using my seals, I don't usually use the handles. So that's why mine's not on, but yours comes with it. So there's no problem if you like using the handle or not. And then I have here, this is a little silicone mat that I'm going to use to make the seals on. The other surface that I use a lot is parchment paper. So you could just roll out a big sheet of parchment paper, and that's what you can make your seals on. That's almost always what I do at home, is just roll out a big sheet of that, because then I have plenty of space to work and everything. In this case, I brought this one, and I'm putting these napkins underneath because like hot glue, they'll drip. They don't drip as much as hot glue does, but they still do kind of drip and kind of fall down. So you want something under them to catch so it doesn't get on your table or the surface that you're working on. I also brought a few other stamps with me to just show you. So this is the size of a regular 1-inch stamp. So the size that you guys got in your box is a mini, which is really fun. And that's going to be perfect for our little gift tag. So I did bring this little example. So that's what it looks like on this tag. So it really is the perfect size for these little tags, like just to add that little seal and then the words. Or for this example, if we had left room, we could have put the seal and then we could write the name too. So that's a fun thing to do. So here you can see the sealing wax is starting to come out of the red a little bit, but when I'm squeezing, it's not coming out yet. So it's not quite ready. And the green, let's see, the glue guns from my shop heat a little bit faster. So that one seems ready. So I think we can start with the green, and let's just do an example. So when I'm pouring my wax, I like to rest it on the stand, and I'm going to tilt it forward until the nozzle is almost touching. See if I can show you this way. Like I want that as close to the mat as possible. So I'm going to lean it forward, and for our stamp, it's a mini. So we're going to need less than a full squeeze. So it's just going to be about that size. That's about how much wax we need. So it's smaller than this amount, or smaller than this size. And then we'll turn it over and we're going to press in and hold down. We're going to keep holding it and then let go. A lot of people ask, how do you get these circular seals? And there's a few tips. One is the temperature of your wax. So you don't want it to get too hot. If it's really runny, or if there's tons of bubbles in it, that's a good sign that it's too hot. The other thing is your pour. You want the pour to be in a circle, and that's easy to do with the glue gun. And then the last thing is your press. You need to press it in centered and hold and then let go. And even this one, you can see I got it a little off centered. And right now I'm sitting down when I'm making these, but at home, almost always when I make seals, I'm standing because I do it over my counter that's taller. And it's easier when you're like directly above to get it centered. So that's something that does help. Mary asked, you cool the wax for a couple of seconds first? So no. So these examples, I'm kind of doing it slow because I'm showing you. So If I were just to make this at home, I would just do my squeeze and then I'm directly sticking my stamp in. I don't want to let it cool because sometimes it can cool too much that then it's like not going to press anymore. So you don't need to let the wax cool before you press. But after you press, you do need to let it cool. So these ones you've noticed I haven't touched. This one I'm thinking it's about ready. And you're going to know you can start to pull it off and it just comes off the silicone mat easily or the parchment paper really easily when it's cooled. And you can also feel to the touch, like it doesn't feel that warm anymore. So I know it's going to be done and it should just pop off. It should easily come off the stamp. If your wax is sticking and getting stuck to it, that's an indication that your wax is too hot or that your metal is getting too hot, because after you make a seal and you feel it, it's kind of warm. But if you've made like 5 of these, your metal's going to heat up and it needs to cool down. So what you can do is, especially if you're going to make a bunch of your gifts and you're using your little snowflake stamp, have a little ice pack close by and just make 3 or 4 and then put it on the ice pack for a while, let it cool down, and then you can make some more. Let's see if this one's done. How cute. That one's in, these 2 are in the Christmas collection online, the holiday collection. They're super fun. And then these 2 are part of a one-time holiday box that's on my shop right now too. But the Christmas stamps are so fun. Let's do our little mini again since it is available. Let's try our red. So you don't need a ton of wax for this size. And so when we're pressing down, we want to use some pressure. We're not just going to set it and let go because it can move around. We want to use pressure and hold it in place. And part of the reason you want to use pressure when you're pressing it down is so that all of the wax gets up into the details of the stamp. If you don't do as much pressure, you won't get as detailed. And the other thing that can happen if you don't use a lot of pressure, you'll notice, let's see if we can get this to show up in this seal. You see this whole area where it's the flat portion of the stamp, how it's just nice and smooth. When your wax temperature is not hot enough, or if you don't use enough pressure, you'll get a lot of like grooves and stuff in this area where it won't look flat. So that's something you just want to make sure you're using the pressure, and the wax temperature is, you want it billowy. If you start pouring your wax and you notice that it's getting really runny, let's see if this one's close. I think the green might be close to be getting too hot. Let's try it. Yeah, so this one you can see it's just a little more runny than the other ones were. So what I would do, I'm still going to use this wax. I'm still going to press it and it's going to still be okay, but I'm going to unplug my glue gun. So if I, or in my case, I'm going to turn it off. But so I turned it off or unplug it so then it's not hot anymore. And then it can cool down and you can keep making more. So then Caroline asked, how do you clean out the wax gun to switch out wax seal colors? So that is a great question. So what I like to do is I like to have a few different, I have different glue guns for every color, but that is a bit excessive, I know, for most people. So what you can do is with this set, if this is your first time using your sealing wax, I would start with your white, because white, you want to start with your lightest color and work to darkest if you're using only one glue gun. So I would start with white and then do your green and then do red. And you could just run one in after the other and you'd have some marbling, and that could be really pretty because white and red would look cute together. The green and red might look okay or might not. You'd have to try it. Or if you don't want the colors to mix, what you can do is you can do red and then run a clear glue stick through, like a hot glue stick. And that'll help clear out the one color and then you put in your next color. And then, but sometimes it does take more than one glue stick. And depending on the color, sometimes it's hard to get it out. So I will say red, this isn't the darkest of reds, but red is a tricky color to get out. Black is almost impossible to get out, and dark navy blue too. So super dark colors, even if you run through a bunch of hot glue sticks, you're still going to have traces of that color in your glue gun. So something you could do is you could do a whole glue gun that this is just a dark color glue gun, and then I have one for light colors, or you could do one that this is for white and this is all my other colors, or things like that. Like once you do another color before white, it's hard to get back to pure white again. So that is one thing that's a little bit tricky about it. And then Serena asked if you have to use the whole thing, and that's yes, you do. So you're going to run through the whole stick, and then you're going to put the next one in and move it through. So you can't pull it out. That's going to ruin your glue gun. So yeah, so let me show you really quick a couple more things. So for example, all of my seals, sorry, these are like sticking together. I often make seals in like the videos I make and stuff. I'm making all these seals ahead of time, and then people are like, well, how did you even attach, like, what do you do now? It's just this wax seal. How do you attach it? So I have in my shop these double-sided adhesives. You can find similar items on Amazon, or I use glue dots a lot actually, but you can just put this on here and you can have a little stockpile of seals ready to go. So I do that. I have some that, and a couple of weekends ago, I just pulled one out for a wedding, and I was so glad I had it ready to go because I wanted to use a seal, but I didn't have time to sit down and make one. So then you take the little sticker part off, and then you just attach it here. So we could put it on our little tag, and then this is where we could write our name, and it looks super cute. The other thing that you can do too, let me show you with this one, is so with our little mini seals, a glue dot would fit perfectly on this, and then you can just set it there. Or if I wanted to, I can pour right onto this too. There's no problem with that. So I just want to try to get it centered and just get the right amount of wax that I need. And then I'm going to use my stamp and press. And then that's just going to be there. So there's no problem with pouring right on the tag, or if you're going to put some on your Christmas cards or something, you can pour right onto those envelopes with not a problem. I personally like to make them ahead of time because sometimes I mess up the seals, or sometimes like it wouldn't matter for a lot of these, but like the present one, say you went to press it and you pressed it sideways instead of the right direction, or if it said thank you, or, you know, depending on what the stamp is, sometimes it doesn't matter what direction it is, but sometimes the way you press it could mess it up if you did it the wrong way on accident. And then we had another question, can you cut these and use them in a warmer? So yes, so if you're new to wax seals, you can melt your sealing wax in a low temp glue gun, or I didn't bring mine today, but there's little warmers and you can get a little metal spoon and you can put little wax beads in them. So yeah, totally. If you make this and you're like, you know what, I don't love that this side has more wax on the lip, I'm just going to cut this up. You can totally remelt it in the spoon and reuse it that way. So that's a great option. And Mary asked, how do you store your metal stamps to keep them from scratching when not being used? That's another great question. And I didn't bring an example, but what I have mine in are, they're like from the craft store, and they're like bead sets, I think. Like, I don't know, they're like plastic storage containers from the craft store. So I have some that have some like long horizontal sections. And so I just stack them in there. There's also a metal tin that I use on some of mine where they fit exactly all in this metal tin. I don't like that one as much because the lid pops open easily. And the biggest one I use has a bunch of squares, and I have a bunch in there, but then I have like 10 in one, so I can't see them, and there is the possibility of getting them scratched. So I don't love that storage use. There was someone that posted in the group, in the Facebook group, I'm not sure if you're in there or not, but she shared, I think it was a pill organizer, what you would use if you had like medication pills. And she had one stamp in each section, and then she put a pre-made seal on the top, so then she knew which one was in it. So I thought that was a very creative storage way to store them. I will say I do store them all, so I'll have all of them like this in a little cubby. And I don't notice too much scratching to the point where it's like noticeable in the end seal. And I've been storing mine like that for, a couple of years. So I don't think that's it is a concern, but not a huge concern. So then Carolyn asked, if I want to make several wax seals to gift to someone as a present, how can I package them for a nice presentation and keep them safe? Yeah, that's a great question. So let me show you. I don't have an example of that with me, but let me see if I can kind of explain it. So what I do, I actually have a video about this that's in the Facebook group and on YouTube, and so I can try to reshare that. But so what I would do is I'd have a little card. So say this was your card you're going to put them on, and maybe you'd want it a little bit smaller than this. And I would get my seals. So say this was one of my seals I'm going to give, and you're going to want to put a double-sided adhesive on them so then they can use them like a sticker later, right? So I'm going to have all my seals, and let's just pretend all of these have the sticker backings on them. Okay, so I'm like getting them organized and I feel happy with how they are. And maybe I could do one more row here. But the way that I like to attach them, if you use a glue dot, don't put the glue dot on this because it won't stick to that paper. But if you put the glue dot here where you want the seal to be, and then you just press the seal on and press it down, it'll stick. So you put your double-sided adhesive and then you use the glue dot to attach the seal to this paper for your presentation. And then I just put this paper into a plastic sleeve and seal it like those plastic art sleeves. So when you buy a print or a card or something, they have a little sleeve on them like that. And then that way they can see every seal, but it's protected with the little plastic sleeve. And that's what I do when I sell them at markets and stuff. And so if you go, I don't know if you're in the Facebook group or not, Caroline, but in there, if you go back like a month or something, I did have a video where I talked about that. And if not, I can share that again. But that's a great question. So this one, let's just see how this one turned out. Super cute. It's like the perfect size for these. I love it so much. So those are kind of the basics of making the wax seals. I'm gonna go into more detail with like the gift wrapping in the next few weeks. For the first 12 days of Christmas, I'm going to be sharing ideas for how to wrap the gifts and how to incorporate wax seals. Another one that was really fun that I'll just explain really quickly was, I posted this on my Instagram, but it was this one. So this is our same little stamp, but this is hot glue. So when you make a hot glue seal, you're still going to use a low temp glue gun, and what you're going to want to do is just put this on an ice pack. So if the metal is cold, it won't stick to the glue. And then you would just press them, and then while it's wet, you squish them together. But that's like a fun different way that you can use your stamp too. Let me know if you guys have other questions. I'm going to switch the camera to my face. Hi. So if you have more questions, then we're going to keep talking and answering your questions. I'm happy to answer them.
What's the name of the Facebook group?
Yeah, let me put it in the chat here real quick, and then you guys can get on there. If I have it. It's called the lettering box. Well, one second, let me find it. I'm logged out of Facebook on my computer, so it's not pulling it up, but I have it right here. Let me get it for you. But the Facebook group is really great because in there, I don't know if you guys have used Facebook guides before, but let's see if this link works. Yes, okay, let me share this in the chat. Okay, so here's the link for the group. So in the group, there's guides. So there's a guide for each lettering box. So all the tutorials that I'm going to share for this box are going to be in one guide. And since I haven't shared any yet, there's not a guide for that yet. But like last month's box, or the last box, was fall, and it was a watercolor box. So all those tutorials are still in there that you guys can check out. if you wanted to look at any past projects. But there's also these 3 guides for wax seals. So there's a wax seal basic. So that talks about how to make a wax seal, how to change colors, and the super basics of wax seals. But then there's one that's like an intermediate, and then there's like an advanced technique one. So there's tons of ideas for wax seals in those guides that you can go back to and watch. And that's what the little tutorial that I made about attaching the wax seals to the cards. I did a YouTube tutorial for you guys that was it was just about selling wax seals, because I know a lot of people in the group do markets or do different craft things. And so I just shared how I sell them and package them and stuff. So if you guys ever wanted to do that, or even just gifting them, then you know how to like put them together. So that's in one of those wax seal guide in the Facebook group. So yeah, it's great to join. And if you don't have Facebook, I also just share everything via email at the end of the week too. So don't worry, like if you're like, I don't do Facebook, like I still share all the same tutorials and everything for everyone there too. So do you guys have any other questions about things at the moment? We sped through that. It was so fast. So here's some things to look forward to. So again, in the Facebook group or via email, I'll be sharing some tutorials. So I'm going to I'll break down the lettering, because some people don't want to watch the whole workshop to get all the information. So I'm going to break down step by step the different lettering things that we did. And then for the first 12 days of Christmas, every day I'm going to do a different way to use a wax seal with like in a holiday way. So it could be gift wrapping or cards or an ornament or different fun things. So I'll be sharing that in this group too. So you guys get lots of ideas of how to use your stamp and how with wrapping your gifts and stuff. So that should be really fun. Great. If you just joined the group, then I'm going to add you. I'll add you after this. Lee asked a great question. What do you use to highlight the seal with the gold? That's a great question. I did bring my pen for that. So let me switch back and I'm going to show you that real quick. Okay. So what I'm using, okay. So this is a Krylon gold leafing pen. It's focused. And this is my favorite pen because it colors well on sealing wax and hot glue. So like these ones are made of hot glue. So there's one other pen called a Deco color pen, and those work well too. Excuse me. But this one is like my all-time favorite. It works really well. It does have a large tip. And so it's like a paint pen, so you have to shake it up and pump it. And then once you have a good flow, you can color over it. So I like to go over the designed portion of the seals. So for something like this where it's already on the tag, I probably wouldn't try to go around the rim because it's attached to the paper. So I'd probably get the paint on the edge. So you could do something like this. So that's super cute. Or say that you wanted to do around the edge on this one, this is how I do it. So I hold it with these fingers and I just go around like this. And then I get, like, make sure to get that bottom side. Some people, when they do this, they only get the top. And then I don't understand why. I'm like, I just want you to do the whole thing. And then I just keep kind of rotating around. And this takes about, like, I usually leave it for like 15-20 minutes before I touch them, just so they have plenty of time to dry. So from here, I'd set it on my paper like that, and then I don't touch it, because right now, if I touch it, it's gonna smear off. But what I love about this pen is that once it's on, it's permanent. So like these ones, like I can't rub this off. It's permanently on there. And a lot of gold pens that you get with wax seal kits, they're not permanent. So they look really great until you touch it and then it's gone. And so for me, a lot of the seals, I gift them, but I also sell them. So I'm like, I don't want something that's just going to rub off as soon as someone buys it, you know? So that's why I love this pen so much. And the same with the powders that I've seen. They look really great and they kind of give a softer effect than this pen, I think. But again, sometimes they could just rub off with the touch of the finger. So, yes, the name of the pen is here. And I think, I'm pretty sure I have a link here. Let me grab it for you. So this is, I get mine on Amazon. And last I checked, they were like $11. So they're kind of pricey, but they do last a long time. Like I make hundreds and hundreds of seals and I'll get through like at least 1,000 or more with one pen. So you can get through a lot of seals with these. But that's the link to it. And yeah, the Amazon's been the only place I've been able to find them. I haven't seen this specific brand anywhere else. I will say, I know there's lots of other gold paint pens out there and I have not tried them all. I'm just saying this is the one I've tried and it works, so I've stuck with it. But if you have gold paint pens at home, you might have something that works well. And then I think this is Beatrice. They have the pens at Dick Blick Art too. So that's perfect. So if you have one of those close by, then you could totally do that or purchase online too. But yeah, great question. I forgot to ask about the gold. So from here, like at this point, this one, let's see. It's like mostly dry. So that wasn't even the 15 minutes and it's pretty dry, but I would err on the side of letting it dry longer, just so it has plenty of time to dry before you touch it and do anything with it. Oh, Caroline says she's gotten them at Michael's too. Okay, I guess I've only checked at Hobby Lobby. So Michael's, Amazon, Dick Blick, that's where to get these pens. And yeah, they have them in silver and rose gold too. So that's a great option. Excuse me. Okay, do you guys have any other questions or things that you were wondering about? The other items in the box were the tissue paper, which if you haven't gotten that out yet, it's actually really nice. It's like thicker. There's two thicknesses of tissue paper usually, and this is like a thicker one. So with the green, you can wrap it and you can't see through. With the white, I did do a layer of white tissue paper underneath this one. So I did have to wrap it twice, which is not ideal. But if you use it in like a gift bag, then no problem with the see-through thing. So, okay. If you guys don't have any other questions, thank you so much for joining and thank you so much for getting the box. And if you have more questions about lettering or wax seal making, you can totally send me an email, message me on Instagram or Facebook, and I'm totally happy to answer them. And or put it in the Facebook group too. A lot of times when people ask a question in the group, and then it helps me be like, oh, people don't know this, or this is something that I could share about. And so I'll make a video about it. So definitely let me know any questions you guys have, because I want to help you be able to use your box, to learn lettering, to have fun being creative and using these fun tools. So thank you so much everyone for joining, and I'll see you over the next couple months in the Facebook group and via email. And I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving and have a fun holiday with your family. So thank you so much for everyone being here, and I'll see you next time.